In a number of ways, the Terezín ghetto looked like many of the other Jewish ghettos of World War II. High walls surrounded the former garrison town. Ironically, it was in the shape of a six-pointed star. Inmates were housed in overcrowded barracks. The words Arbeit macht frei, work will make you free, were written above the gates. But inside of those gates, life was about to erupt with musical and cultural activity. The musical activities which first began secretly in attics and basements during a time where mere possession of musical instruments was forbidden. These practices were soon condoned by the Nazis. The great Jewish musicians of Prague had brought musical scores and manuscript paper with them among their most prized possessions. And gradually, musical instruments started to appear around the ghetto. An accordion, a harmonium, even a piano. And while in one sense this musical activity was a distraction, something to divert attention from the horrors surrounding them, it was actually so much more than that, because in a variety of ways, the music of the Terezín ghetto served as a mechanism for survival, helping the Jewish inmates to endure in seemingly unendurable conditions. To be clear, the conditions of the Terezín ghetto, or Theresienstadt, as it was called in German, were not near the levels of horror seen in the death camps. But the seriousness of these conditions should not be overlooked. In the barracks, 600 people were crowded into a single room, with 2 toilets, little food, and relentless spread of disease. By 1942, the town built for 6,000 people was now bursting with 60,000 Jews. Typhus ravaged the ghetto. A crematorium was eventually built in Terezín, but not for mass killings the way we often think of crematoriums during this time. This was simply for disposing of all of the bodies of those who had died of typhus and other disease. And with this in mind, the notion of being a parent to a young child in Terezín seems like an added layer of pain. And perhaps this is why there was so much music written in the ghetto from the perspective of a parent to a child. These lullabies must have represented something so profound and heartbreaking for the parents who held their sick and dying children in their arms, feeling powerless, unable to help them. Or parents like Ilse Weber, who were no longer in the same place as their children and were haunted by the unknown. Weber was a poet who, before being transported to Theresienstadt, sent her youngest son on a kinder transport to Sweden. Once in Theresienstadt, she worked as a night nurse in the children's infirmary. And there she would comfort the children by sitting at their bedside, singing words of her poetry while accompanying herself on guitar. In a poem dedicated to her son, she wrote, "My boy, are you healthy and learning your studies? Do you still play with tin soldiers? I'm living in a real barrack with dark walls and dreary rooms. There's no sun or leaves and trees. I'm a nurse here for the children. And to me, every child here has a little piece of you. My thoughts then fly to you, and nevertheless, I'm happy that you're not here. And I would gladly suffer 1,000 torments if I could pay for your childhood happiness that way. But I can do nothing except write letters, full of longing, never to be sent." Viga la Weine, der Wind spielt auf der Leihe, spielt so süß im grünen Ried, die Nachtigall, die singt ihr Lied. Viga la Weine. auf der Leihe. Vigala, Vigala, Verne, der Mond ist die Laterne. Er steht am dunkeln Himmelsheld und schaut hernieder auf die Welt. Vigala, Vigala, Verne, der Mond ist die Laterne. Laut, die süße Ruhe. Schlaf, mein Kindchen, schlaf auch du. Vigala, Vigala, Wilde, wie ist die Welt so still. Der Regen rinnt, und der Regen rinnt. Ich denk im Dunkeln an dich, mein Kind. Hoch sind die Berge und tief ist das Meer. Mein Herz ist müd und Sehnsucht schwer. Und der Regen rinnt, und der Regen rinnt. Warum bist du so fern, mein Kind? Und der Regen rinnt, und der Regen rinnt. Gott selbst hat uns getrennt, mein Kind. Du sollst nicht Leid und Elend sehen, sollst nicht auf steinigen Gassen gehen. Und der Regen rinnt, und der Regen rinnt. Hast du mich nicht vergessen? Ein Kind, wie all die vielen, die auf der ganzen Erde sind, wie all die anderen gespielen, und doch bist du so anderes Kind. Du bist ein Kind, dem Heimat fehlt, dir allen Städten bist du fremd. Solang dich nicht das Wort beseelt, Heimat meyalel, bayar batar, haruach, noshevet sham shechav, beni shechav bimnucha, uma shan. Laila tzel yauf maher meod, asur להתעצל, מחר צריך לעבוד, מחר יצא הבא לחרוש, בתלם ילך אב, החתר בני הקטן, with the development of the Terezín cabaret, music of satire, humor, and irony helped the Jews to overcome their dread of the deportations, their hunger, and homesickness. Now, it wasn't simply that they were able to laugh things off, but the cabaret provided them with a powerful weapon: mockery. Some of the satirical cabaret shows bravely attacked the ghetto administration and the inhuman conditions surrounding them. The Czech artist Karl Schwank established the first cabaret. He wrote and directed plays and parodies such as The Lost Food Ticket and Long Live Life. While not as biting as the cabarets of Berlin, Schwank's satire sometimes pushed the envelope dangerously close to the limit. The most famous of these might be the play The Last Cyclist. Now, this cabaret mocked the tyranny of the Nazi regime by depicting an evil society bent on oppressing a minority: cyclists. This production was immediately centered after its dress rehearsal, only to be revived off-Broadway 5 years ago. And while most of the music of the Terezín cabaret was not this pointed, it did utilize a tremendous amount of irony, often pairing texts that depicted the brutal and painful realities of the ghetto with music that was lilting and whimsical, evoking jazz and popular music of the time. This next song, Das Lied von den zwei Ochsen, for instance, seems to evoke a Kurt Weill love song more than it does its actual texts, which likens the Jews of Theresienstadt to cattle. Ihr naht euch wieder schwankende Gestalten, kein Tag vergeht, am dem man sucht nicht sehen. Wie ihr den Wagen, meine guten Alten, begdeckten Schritten durch die Straßen zieht. Ich sehe, wie ihr uns Menschen hier betrachtet, in unserem Kleinmut, unserem Hass und Streit. Und weiß genau, wie sehr ihr uns verachtet. Immer herzenfroh, dass ihr zwei Ochsen seid. Wenn sich die Leute sanken hier und boxen, ihr bleibt zufrieden, ruhig, setzt und satt. Darum seid ihr vor mich, ihr beiden Ochsen, die klügsten Wesen hört die Menschen hier verschieden sprechen, nicht in der Mund hat nur nicht noch den Sinn. Die Holländer, die Dänen und die Tschechen und Deutsch aus Prag und Wien und aus Berlin. Erschüttert, wie sie voneinander reden, wie man sich hier noch nach Nationen trennt, ausgerechnet sich noch zu befehden in einer Stadt, die sich ein Ghetto nennt. In diesem Unspezil, in diesem Falle gibt's keinen Unterschied bei Mensch und Rind. Denn Juden und nur Juden sind wir alle, so wie die Ochsen alle Ochsen sind. Bitte nicht lachen Sie über die Sachen, die täglich mir so oft passieren. Die Offen, die Löcher, die Stühlchen, die Dächer, mich kann das aber gar nicht mehr genieren. Ich finde es entsetzlich, wenn jemand so plötzlich so stürmisch nun redet, alles los. Gestart mit Tag mit Warten, nicht mit Zaten, es kann auch niemand warten, wann's auch ein Unsinn bloß. Ja, das geht nicht so, manche versteh nicht, ich hör's nur und red nicht und sage nur, ja, wir in Terezín, ihr nehmet's Leben sehr leicht hin, denn wenn es anders wär's einmal. Es gibt hier schöne Frauen, eine Vergnügen sie anzuschauen, drum nehm ganz gern ich ihn, Terezín. Bin frei von jeder Schuld und habe deshalb viel Geduld, wenn in der Brust aus Herz auch voller Sehnsucht ist. Ja, wir in Terezín, wir nehmen's Leben sehr leicht hin und lieben unser kleines Terezín. Sollt ich hier mal sterben, wird man nach mir erben und Garderobe und das Ghetto-Geld. Ich raussuch die Ätter und grüß meine Vetter, ich bin schon wieder und aus dieser Welt. Erzähl meinen Lieben, was wir hier getrieben, wie einfach wir geschöpft ohne Frag. Die Kaffee bei Touren und bei Suppe, bei Fleisch nur durch die Lupe und das als Fleventag. Auch Knödel und Creme von süßen Mädel, von Hundet keine Spur und sage nur, ja, wir in Terezín, ihr nehmen's Leben sehr leicht hin, denn wenn es anders wär's einmal. Es gibt hier schöne Frauen, eine Vergnügen sie anzuschauen, drum nehm ganz gern ich ihn, Terezín. Bin frei von jeder Schuld und habe der hab viel Geduld, wenn in der Brust Hausherz auch voller Sehnsucht ist. Ja, wir in Terezín, wir nehmen's Leben sehr leicht hin und lieben unser kleines Terezín. Early in his time in Terezín, pianist and conductor Raphael Schechter understood just how easily a prison mentality might set in. And he chose to combat that by using the tools that he had. At night, he would secretly gather the men and women, first separately and then later together, in the basement of the barracks and lead them in singing Czech folk songs. Tapping deep into Czech pride, Schechter helped them to remind themselves through music that they were part of something that goes beyond the ghetto walls. And the need for this type of connection existed in this case in a nationalistic sense, but it also existed in a spiritual sense. Maintaining a connection to Jewish life was a deeply felt need in the ghetto. In December of 1941, the first night of Hanukkah was celebrated, and the ghetto library contained more than 10,000 volumes of books in Hebrew. There was even a secret synagogue built. For anyone who may have visited Terezín, perhaps you've seen this. I'm seeing some nods. This hidden synagogue, which still exists today, it was decorated with 6-pointed stars and beautifully calligraphed texts like "V'techazena einenu b'shuvcha l'Tzion berachamim," may our eyes witness your return to Zion in compassion. A text that seems to carry even greater weight in this context. And in response to the need for this connection, Jewish music was written. Beautiful Jewish music. In the case of Victor Ullmann, and Ullmann was a fascinating composer because in his early life, he didn't identify as a Jew at all. His parents were Christian, he was born Christian, he was raised Christian, but he had one Jewish grandparent, which for the Nazis was Jewish enough. And he was rounded up as a Jew, taken to Theresienstadt, and there he began to compose arrangements to Yiddish folk songs, Hebrew folk songs, almost as though he was taking this identity that was put upon him and reclaiming it in his own way. So Ullmann wrote these Yiddish folk songs that you'll hear in just a moment. Some songs that may sound familiar, written in the ghetto in Theresienstadt by Victor Ullmann.
Schau, still, mach nicht kein Gerede, der Rebe geht schon tanzen wieder. Schau, still, mach nicht kein Gewalt, der Rebe geht schon tanzen bald. Schon tanzen bald. Als der Rebe tanzt, tanzen mit die Welt. Lo mir mit die Hand. Schau, still, mach nicht kein Gerede, der Rebe geht schon tanzen wieder. Schau, still, mach nicht kein Gewalt, der Rebe geht schon tanzen bald. Schon tanzen bald. Als der Rebe tanzt, tanzt doch mit der Tisch. Lo mir mit die Fischer. Still, mach nicht kein Gerede, der Rebe geht schon tanzen wieder. Schau, still, macht nicht kein Gewalt.
Der Rebe geht schon tanzen bald. Schon tanzen
Geht
bald.
tanzen bald. Als der Rebbe Elimelech ist geworden, sehr freilich, ist geworden, sehr freilich, Elimelech. Hat ausgetan die Twilen und hat angetan die Brillen und geschickt noch die Fiedels, die zwei. Und als die Fiedel, dicke Fiedel, hoben Fiedel, dicke Fiedel, hoben Fiedel, dicke Fiedel, hoben sie. Und als die Fiedel, dicke Fiedel, hoben Fiedel, dicke Fiedel, hoben Fiedel, dicke Fiedel, hoben sie, la 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 la. Als der Rebbe Elimelech ist geworden, mehr noch freilich, ist geworden, mehr noch freilich, Elimelech. Hat abgemacht, hat Dolle, mit dem Schabes-Rab noch Tolle, und geschieht noch die Peikles, die zwei. Und als die Peikel, dicke Peikles, hoben Peikel, dicke Peikel, hoben Peikel, dicke Peikles, hoben sie. Und als die Peikel, dicke Peikles, hoben Peikel, dicke Peikel, hoben Peikel, dicke Peikel, hoben sie, la 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 la. Und als der Rebbe Elimelech ist geworden, Gorstak freilich, ist geworden, Gorstak freilich, Elimelech. Hat ausgetan die Kittel und hat angetan das Kittel und geschickt noch die Zimbels, die zwei. Und als die Zimbel, dicke Zimbels, hoben Zimbel, dicke Zimbel, hoben Zimbel, dicke Zimbel, hoben sie. Und als die Zimbel, dicke Zimbel, hoben Zimbel, dicke Zimbel, hoben Zimbel, dicke Zimbel, hoben sie. La 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 la.
Amidst all of this, there was the music that more explicitly empowered those who performed it and those who heard it. Like the cabaret music, which gave the Jews a voice of satire, music also gave them a voice for defiance. And the sense of defiance through music was perhaps most famously seen in the finale from Karl Schwank's cabaret, The Lost Food Ticket. In this song, the singer sings, "Life begins tomorrow, and with it nears the time when we can pack up our bundles and go home. We will join hands in defiance of these cruel times, and at the ruins of the ghetto, we will laugh." For the Jews who expressed this message, seemingly in secret as it was sung in Czech, the language shared by so many of the inmates, it appeared to be an exhilarating feeling. This song became so popular that Schwank included it in many of his subsequent cabarets, and it became known as the Terezín March. In the words of one survivor, it echoed the suppressed longing of every inmate, and we promptly adopted it as our Terezín anthem.
Žárný Bože obzjedok do prejluší, komu smích do kolebky dán, komu plakat bez príčiny neziluší, kdo zna lásku aj milovan. Každý čul taky nebo načí, zkrátka kdo je na kom svět je rád, ten se nikdy na něho nemračí, vesele zpívat častokrát. Všechno jde, když se chce, za ruce se vezmeme, na vzokruté době humor v srdci máme. Den co den stále jdem, sem a tam s jestěhulem, a je vetričet i slomeč smíme psát. Ola zítra život častina, a ním si blíží čas, kdy si zbalíme svůj ráníček a půjde domů zas. Všechno jde, když se chce, za ruce se vezmeme a na troskách ghetto budeme se smát. zitro zivotšastina, ním si blíží čas, kdy si spálíme svůj raníček a půjde domů zas. Všechno jde, když srdce za ruce se vezmeme a na troskách ghetto budeme se smát.
Moving beyond the Terezín March, perhaps the most compelling instance of defiance through music came when pianist and conductor Raphael Schechter decided to assemble a choir to prepare and perform the Verdi Requiem. Yeah. This was considered a bold move, not merely because of how demanding a piece of music this is, but there were glorious pieces of classical music based on Jewish themes, like Elijah or Judas Maccabeus. And they'd been banned in all of occupied Europe. This, it seemed, would be the one place where those pieces could be performed. Why, of all things, should the Jewish inmates in Theresienstadt sing a Catholic Mass? But with one score, Raphael Schechter taught the Requiem by rote to 150 singers because he understood that something extraordinary was possible. While the Nazis may have dismissed it, thinking that the Jews were singing a requiem for themselves, Schechter told the singers that they must sing this requiem to the Nazis. That the message behind this requiem was that one day the Nazis would perish. They would meet their maker, and they would be held accountable for their crimes. And with this intention behind the Latin text of the Mass, Schechter famously told his chorus, "You must sing to the Nazis what you could never say to them." The Requiem was performed 15 times in Theresienstadt, with a choir that had to be continually refilled and reinforced as transports to the east continued. But one of these performances took place during a visit by the International Red Cross, a propaganda stunt meant to artificially show the world how well the Jews were being treated. At this performance, in addition to members of the Red Cross, many high-ranking Nazi officials were present. Among them was Adolf Eichmann. And singing to Eichmann's face, the members of this choir sang at the top of their lungs, Dies Irae, Day of Wrath, Liber Scriptus, the book of judgment into which the names of sinners would be written. And they sang Liberame, which literally translates to deliver me. But in this context, maybe Liberame more accurately meant liberate me. The Red Cross performance was their last, as Schechter and all of the members of the choir were transported to Auschwitz shortly thereafter. But Schechter understood something deeply profound. He understood that in singing this music, the singers were able to empower themselves at a time when they had no real power of any kind. In a time where they felt silenced, he gave them a voice. And looking right into their eyes, the Jews sang to the Nazis what they could never, ever say to them.
Gemisco tanquam reus, culpa robet vultus meus, supplicanti, supplicanti, Deus, qui Mariam preces me non sunt ine, sed tu bonus fac benine, ne perenni cremerine. interoves locum presta, et ab hedis me sequestra, interoves locum presta, et ab hedis me sequestra. Statuens, statuens, in parte dextra. Et ab hedis me sequestra, statuens in parte dextra.
Before we conclude this evening, I want to acknowledge some of the people who helped bring this music to life tonight. Alexandra Joan on the piano. BJ's music director, Don Nadel, on guitar. A familiar face, Vasko Dukovsky on clarinet. And some truly phenomenal singers, Jessica Sandidge, soprano. Amy Maude Helfer, mezzo-soprano. Tenor Anthony Webb. And Cantor Dan Singer as our bass tonight. Also want to acknowledge Kristen Kersey, the program administrator for the Center for Prayer and Spirituality, and all of the rabbis and our chazan and our staff and leadership here at BJ for making an evening like this possible. Yeah. One more word about the Verdi. One might look at those performances in the Requiem and see that as music of defiance. But the truth is, this was all music of defiance. In so many ways, the Nazis were attempting to dehumanize the Jews and the other prisoners in their ghettos and camps. But in being creative, in expressing themselves through music and art, their humanity was able to flourish in some of the darkest places. This is defiance. This is spiritual resistance. Here were some of the greatest Jewish musicians in Eastern Europe, surrounded by incredible devastation. And they picked up their instruments. They opened their manuscript books. And they raised their voices in an effort to elevate their souls. And when we perform their music, when we hear the music that they took into their hearts, we tell them that they've been heard.
Ich wandre durch Theresienstadt, das Herz so schwer wie Blei, bis je mein Weg ein Ende hat, bis je mein Weg ein Ende hat, doch knapp an der Bastei. Dort knapp an der Bastei, bleib ich auf der Brücke stehen und schau ins Tal hinaus. Ich möchte so gerne weitergehen, ich möchte so gerne weitergehen, ich möchte so gern nach Haus. Ich möchte so gern nach Haus. Ich wende mich betrübt und matt, so schwer wird mir dabei. Theresienstadt, wann wohl das Leid ein Ende hat, wann sind wir wieder frei? Wann sind wir wieder The readings of names continue at SAJ. This is the Society for Advancement of Judaism. Tonight, BJ's time slot, I believe, is 12:30 to 1 o'clock. Leila Tov.